In a world of only light and darkness, one thing that's created is a shadow. Shadow the Hedgehog is a game where Shadow has a cap in one hand and vengeance in the other. But no one talks about Shadow the Hedgehog without thinking about Sonic. Oh, 2D platformer with a blue hedgehog, best game ever. Shadow can't even have the worst game, it's always oh Sonic 06. There's Sonic tubers, but Shadow tubers might as well be left in the dark. This is a concept called overshadowing, where one thing can get in the way of liking or even just noticing another thing for what it is on its own due to comparing it to something else. These 10 Gen 1 Pokémon are the Pokémon that you can definitely say are overshadowed by another Pokémon or a situation that you can almost never stop comparing it to, and are mostly remembered for that rather than themselves, taking a bit of their own identity away. And with that, these are the top 10 overshadowed Gen 1 Pokémon. Number 10. Fearow. When Pokemon decide to make the group of starting route bird Pokemon, that left just about any other early game normal flying types to get a bit shafted by the cool kids table. Fearow is a nice looking bird, but that first walk through the world in Generation 1 will be leading you to more often than not pick up a Pidgey rather than a Spearow. Spearow was even left in a little corner on the side of Viridian City after the required grass you were forced to walk through that only had Pidgeys and Rattata. And no one went here for Spearow, they went here in Pokemon Yellow for Mankey to beat Brock. They also only made the Fearow line 2 stages compared to Pidgeot's 3 stages, and while it doesn't make it a bad Pokemon by any means, it is hard to think about Fearow without the comparison of Pidgeot. Even in the anime, Spearow and Fearow are usually looked at to be the more villainous Pokemon, while the Pidgeot line were more of the heroes in this rivalry. Number 9. Pinsir. I don't know if you all had the same feelings when playing Pokemon Stadium 2's Wood Chopping Simulator and you always want to get Scyther instead of Pinsir. Looking back, the animation with Pinsir just seems to be easier to time in that minigame than the one with Scyther, but you were also for sure looking for Scizor over any other Pokemon. With Scyther being given an evolution, it's no wonder a Pokemon like Pinsir might fall slightly behind it. Scyther also just looked like that cool older brother that had your back when you wanted to get into investing all your life savings into high risk stocks, even though it knew it wasn't good for you. And Pinsir, well, Pinsir was just there to collect the interest. Pinsir's pretty great, but imagining a world where it could have been given its own Generation 2 stretched out body evolution in metal armor is one that might have kept it on the same level as Scyther. But the popularity of Scyther in this duo of bugs that overshadowed Pinsir has been something that's commonly seen. Glad they gave Pinsir a Mega Evolution though, still a cool underappreciated Pokemon. Number 8. Hitmonlee. When you're left with only 2 balls and a choice, which one do you cut? When the fighting type gym in Saffron was overtaken by the Psychos, they were left to only reward you with a choice between 2 Pokemon instead of a gym badge. Now you may like Hitmonlee, that's no problem, it's a great Pokemon, but Hitmonchan was typically picked more frequently. Just seeing those elemental punches and the general popularity of those red gloves being on your team led to it being the go-to pick. It might have also had something to do with Hitmonchan's card in the Pokemon trading card game being this all-out beast, but the rivalry between the two with the slight edge to Hitmonchan gave Hitmonlee a little challenge. Number 7. Farfetch'd. If you haven't seen the outroar for a Farfetch'd Evolution since before Generation 8, then that's because a roar is sound, so they have to do more with hearing than seeing. Farfetch'd was constantly asked for, and one of the number 1 Pokemon along with Dunsparce to hopefully get an evolution in a new generation. It was also a typically overshadowed bird Pokemon in the first generation, as almost every other bird was listed when trying to remember all of them before you even got to Farfetch'd. We did talk about how Fearow had a rivalry it was losing with Pidgeot, but Farfetch'd was barely in the race. Even Dodrio isn't really an overshadowed Pokemon, as it was just this cool bird on its own by itself. But Farfetch'd was just this tiny ball of feathers with just a leak, no evolution, and a dream. And then they gave it a distant relative and evolved that instead of the original one, and Ash even caught that instead, so here we are. Number 6. Zubat. This is a different type of overshadowing, as Zubat is really overshadowed by other Zubat. You know when you go into a cave, the first Zubat is never annoying, but you get to about the 15th and all of a sudden you hate this Pokemon. It is common for Pokemon that frequently pop up a little too much to become less liked over time. But it is great how Zubat is loved when it finally evolves into a Crobat. Even Golbat isn't particularly hated or overshadowed by any other Pokemon, and it makes for a pretty great poison type choice for a Halloween special Pokemon team. It's just the frequency of cave Zubats that are reminiscent of that feeling when you're trying to fish out a Gyarados in the backyard of the house in Fuchsia City, but get your 29th Magikarp in a row with the Super Rod. Number 5. Flareon. With all of Eevee's Generation 1 evolutions, there was bound to be a fight for who would be the best. Flareon was given a bit of a slow start as it was a physically focused Pokemon rather than special, and all the fire moves in Generation 1 by this point were only special attacking moves, as that was dictated by the type rather than the move itself. It always seemed like Jolteon and Vaporeon were butting heads for who'd be at the top, while Flareon was just hiding in the back. Even in the Twitch Plays Pokemon Epidemic, it was duped the false prophet as everyone was trying to get Vaporeon instead of Flareon. While it doesn't completely show off the typical GameFAQs forum fights over who is the best Gen 1 evolution, with Flareon falling behind the other two, Twitch Plays Pokemon is a pretty decent consolidation of the rivalry and overshadowing these other two evolutions have over Flareon. Still love those fire types though. Number 4. Moltres. Another fire type hits the ashes as a different trio fights to see who can make it to the top of their pyramid of power. Moltres is already in last place as is Moltres for 3 and thus in 3rd. Zapdos and Articuno have also been the go-to birds, while Moltres was in the back, overshadowed by the other two. The popularity contest usually didn't favor Moltres, and it was again another Pokemon that wasn't super powerful to at least carry it in that regard either. Articuno was graceful, Zapdos was fierce and strong, Moltres looked like it was undercooked and shiny. It was missing the mark by just a bit. Number 3. We're in the top 3 and have one of the most rival duos in Generation 1. In the right corner, we have Butterfree. And in the left corner, we have Butterfree as well because it took the whole stage away from Beedrill. At least it's good that they decided to give Beedrill this small time period where it had a Mega Evolution and Butterfree didn't, but then they gave Butterfree a Gigantamax so Beedrill couldn't even have a sole additional addition, but at least Megas are better than Gigantamaxes. This is another one of those hero vs villain dynamics, as Beedrill is typically seen as the pest or antagonist, where Butterfree is that main character, personal development, teach everybody friendship arc. Usually Butterfree is painted in a better light than Beedrill, and is highly loved more frequently, to where if you like Beedrill more than Butterfree, you might be labeled as a hipster and you should go get that Starbucks application ready. I really don't want to come off as if I'm saying any of these Pokemon are bad, it's just a popularity contest that's fairly prominent when you see a lot of people fighting in the comments over who's the best. I do like Beedrill though. Oh sorry, my real job is calling. Hi, yeah, pumpkin spice latte you said, sir? Number 2. Venusaur. You might be shocked to see this as only number 2, as the Generation 1 starters being in decades of a war over who's the best has been a constantly brought up fighting point for people to start venting their other inner demons by using a different topic to hide those. Venusaur fell slightly behind the other two, but in a graceful way. It always felt more like a hidden gem with something to bring to the table rather than a Pokemon that was just hidden by other Pokemon that were considered better. Charizard and Blastoise always contended for the top spots, but Venusaur was okay chilling. It did have Pokemon Green that was only in Japan, so it did have its own box art and that gave it something to contend with the other two. It just didn't have the same backing that Charizard and Blastoise fought with to try and be the most popular of the trio. It will definitely have diehard fans, but when you're going up against 2 Mega Evolutions, a shiny Pokemon that changes color, and a Gigantamax that Charizard just happens to get, along with Blastoise usually being the pick if you don't want to be too known for going with the status quo of Charizard, then you get a bit overshadowed by those two concepts. Venusaur is still great, and I'm glad it's chilling there as a great Pokemon, but there is almost no way you can say that Venusaur is your favorite Pokemon without the other two starters being brought up to start debating with. Number 1. Raichu. If you're the older child and you're constantly in the shadow of your younger brother, maybe you can relate to the struggles Raichu has to go through. It's such a great Pokemon and it looks amazing. It has that wonderful, complete and cute look, but Pikachu will forever, as the mascot of Pokemon, be prioritized over Raichu. There's almost no other Pokemon that will be able to compete with Pikachu in terms of it having an evolution, but not being evolved. There are definitely some Pokemon who can be loved so much that aren't evolved by some Pokemon fans, but not to the extent that Pikachu has over everyone. This just leaves Raichu in the back. You know Trey Smith, Will Smith's oldest son? Probably not because you just thought of Jaden instead. This is the same thing. Even Pichu has a bit more popularity and is given more things by the Pokemon Company than Raichu is. There's no quest for Raichu. Raichu did get an Alola form at least, but that's them changing Raichu. They'd never do that to Pikachu, they just give it costumes. If there is just one Pokemon to fully summarize what overshadowing is in Pokemon, then seeing Pikachu overshadowing Raichu for the great Pokemon it is the prime example you can go to understand this topic. They even removed your ability to have the choice to evolve Pikachu in Pokemon Yellow and Let's Go Pikachu. Imagine getting removed as an option for evolution. Poor Raichu.